Welcome to the fourth video in the series Othello Lessons. So far we've progressed our understanding away from a maximisation strategy to establish that corners are good and that to obtain corners we have to keep our options as open as possible and restrict our opponent's options. Now this leads us to the counterintuitive approach of minimisation, and we began to look last time at how we should go about reducing our opponent's mobility in order to control the game and dictate our opponent's moves. We should remember that our aim at the moment is to try to flip interior discs as opposed to frontier discs, in an attempt to hold the centre of the bunch, as this means that with each move we're limiting the number of new options we give our opponent, and at the same time we should try to keep our pieces grouped together as much as possible and separate our opponent's pieces into clusters. Now that's a lot of information to take on board, and definitely impossible to grasp well with only the one example that we looked at in the last video. So showing at the moment are a number of positions, and as practice go about pausing at each of the positions and find a move that flips more interior discs than it does frontier discs, and fulfills those three criteria that we looked at last time around. In each position it's white's move, and suggested solutions will appear at the end of the video. The next thing to look at, as opposed to finding moves similar to the ones you're looking for in those examples, is what to do if you're more concerned that your opponent might be able to play a move that gains the centre of the bunch on their next turn and makes it difficult for you to do the same. One basic way to restrict the mobility of your opponent is to establish a move that might be played by your opponent if it was their move instead of yours in a particular position. To demonstrate this, we can consider a typical opening position that is regularly played by strong players. It follows the sequence c4, e3, f6, e6, f5, c5. So now it's black's turn. Instead of looking for the move that keeps black central and flips interior discs, black instead considers the position as if it was the white player's move. Now there's one move that should jump out at you as creating a central position for white. If white was now to play d6, then it wouldn't be flipping any interior discs as such, because no discs are yet to become interior. There simply isn't enough pieces on the board yet. But it does connect white's pieces, separates black's pieces, and puts white in a central position within the bunch. So black should assume that if white would be happy to play that move now, then it stands to reason that white will be happy to play that move when it's actually white's go. If black leaves this option open, then white will most likely play it on its next move. What black must do then is find some way of preventing his opponent from getting to d6 on its next move. Pause the video and find as many moves as you can for black that will prevent white from being able to play d6 on its next move. So, how did you do? If you've gotten all of them, you should have been able to find 4 possible moves, which fall under 2 categories. Now just to point out, there is a third option called poisoning that we'll discuss at a much later date. The options available for black are as follows. Firstly, black can take the move itself. If you're worried about your opponent moving to a particular square, you can always simply play that move yourself. It obviously takes the move away from your opponent. In this position, black plays d6. This is called the Brightwell opening. Secondly, you can remove your opponent's access. In this position, the way you go about this is by trapping the piece at d4. It's this piece that is giving white the ability to play d6, and if we flip that piece to black, white will lose the d6 option. There are 3 ways black can go about this. Firstly, the Stevenson opening, which is c3, or it can play d3, the opening called Leader's Tiger, and finally it can play f4, called the Tiger opening. Now we've said before that we want to maximise our own mobility, So if we assume that we're in a better position if we have more moves available than our opponent, then it's worth having a look at the options available for each colour in each position. In the table shown, we can see the number of moves for black and for white, as well as the difference between the two after black's choice of move. We can see that there's no difference between the moves that restrict access for white. That's the first three on the table: Stevenson, Leader's Tiger and Tiger. Each move leaves black with a total of 5 moves more than white's potential moves. So we might come to the conclusion that the Brightwell opening is weaker because both players end up with the same mobility. But remember that Othello is dynamic, and that just because you lose some mobility with a particular move in one turn, this may create a position in which your mobility is better further down the line. But what this table does support is what we've already been saying. By playing the 3 restrictive moves, that is Stevenson, Leader's Tiger and Tiger, not only have we prevented our opponent's good move, we've also avoided flipping our opponent's outermost frontier discs. These. We've also separated our opponent's pieces, grouped our pieces together, and placed our pieces in the centre of the bunch. And you can see that this holds true for all 3 of those moves, and helps to support our strategy. If our pieces are positioned in the centre of the bunch, our mobility will be greater than our opponent's. Unlike in the Brightwell opening, which by flipping an exterior disc is decentralising our position. Finally, let's look at one more example. Again, it's black's move, and black considers where white would want to play in this position. The problem that black has is that there are 2 moves that stand out as keeping white's position central. That is a move to d3 or a move to g4. If black decides to take d3, for example, white can still play g4, and if black decides to prevent white's access to g4 with d7 say, then white still has d3. To cut a long story short, black can't take both moves himself, so must look for a way to deny white's access by removing all the white pieces at d5 and e6, which are currently giving white access to those moves. Now there are 2 ways to go about this. Can you spot both of them if you pause the video again? The solutions are d6, or even better, f7, although exactly why f7 is better is something worth pondering for yourself. The points to take away is that you can prevent your opponent's good moves through the centre of the bunch by either taking those moves yourself or by flipping the piece that is giving your opponent access to that move. The last thing to do then is offer some potential moves to the examples from earlier. Post the number that you got right in the comments section and outline the moves that your choice disagreed with, and we'll look next time at preserving our own mobility.